Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every other Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
All right, Kim, we are ready to start our conversation on The Zeppo, which was written by Dan Weber and directed by James Whitmore Jr. And the DVD blurb is, while the gang battles creatures from the Hellmouth, Xander has his own adventure when he encounters a group of reanimated corpses out to blow up the high school.
That leaves out a lot of information.
I like it. It's a good blurb. It doesn't give everything away.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's hard to really give anything away in this episode anyway, because I know you kind of mentioned that this is not one of your favorite episodes, but for me, I really like this as a bottle episode, as a commentary on the show itself, as like the kind of like, this is us poking fun at the Buffy formula while also having the episode through the lens of Xander Harris, and it's quite enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot more than I usually do, watching it and taking notes and stuff. And I don't know, that's the impression I got, that it felt like they were making fun of themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very self-aware episode in that way.
Yes. The first thing, like the very starting of the episode, is very much like a old-timey, campy horror movie start.
Mm-hmm.
With the fog and, seeing stuff dart by and all that. That was the impression I got. It was trying to do that.
Yeah.
It's also very coordinated. Like, they're working together and very coordinated for having Faith there. Because they don't usually have anything with Faith.
Yeah.
And she was there in this one, so it seems odd that it would be so coordinated.
Well, what I found, like, the funniest thing that I found is I watched this on Amazon Prime, and it has a previously on Buffy for this episode that is literally just Giles being told he's fired, and that was the only thing on the previously on. It was like, previously on Buffy, you're fired. And then it was the episode starting. I was like, that was it?
Yeah. And there is like nothing in this episode except him saying that the council won't take his calls.
Yeah.
But like, that makes no sense. Why will they not take his calls? There's still a Slayer there. Like, it's really, to the council, it is really like the Slayer is a non-person to them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two Slayers there, and they won't take Giles's call. The only person who has connection with their two Slayers right now. There's two Slayers and a Hellmouth there. You would think if Giles was calling them after just being fired, it would be important. Oh, man. But yeah, this is kind of like a silly, there's a lot of silliness to this episode. It's kind of funny because in a lot of ways, there's formulas that Buffy rejects as a show, and some of them are like the horror tropes and things like that. But it also, by the nature of the show itself, embraces them as well. And I think this episode really embodies some of the weird double standards that exist in Buffy, where it kind of like pulls away from the horror tropes but has to embrace them, and this is really showing them embracing the horror tropes and also making fun of them and making fun of the Buffy formula all at once. And it's really a fun, silly thing to go through when you look at it. And it's one of those that I don't know how much I'm gonna have to say like in the scene by scene, but I'm gonna have a lot to say about just the feel of the show overall and the way that they chose to kind of mess with how the perspective works and kind of the overblown nature of some of the scenes. It's really quite striking that this episode exists and really acts as an interesting commentary on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, let's get into the scene by scene. So we do start in the cave, and we've got, like, the creepy crawlies and the big fogs and all of that, and we see our our Scoobies. We see Buffy and Faith and Giles kind of standing at the ready, and then Willow comes out and says an incantation and blows out a candle, and the mist clears, and the demon's there, and they go in for the attack, and Giles gets knocked down, because of course he does, and Faith comes up and plunges a sword into the heart of the demon, and yeah, they are victorious and start to dust themselves off, essentially, saying that they think that that's the last of them, and talking about the nature of the demons themselves and how they're a little bit more rugged than the casual demons. And Giles even mentions that if he had known just how strong these demons were, that he wouldn't have allowed Willow and then we realize that Xander is also there, and we have not seen him at all because he is under a pile of garbage, basically, just buried in rubble and digging himself out of garbage. It immediately reminded me of, is it The Replacement? It's like the 3rd episode in season 5 where he gets duplicated, and he's also in a pile of garbage in that. Like, there's just something about Xander-centric episodes and him digging himself out of crap. So yeah, and that's kind of our setup. They continue talking through the fact that Xander shouldn't have been there and that he almost got himself killed. Willow makes an inappropriate joke about roasting marshmallows on the burning demon bodies, and points out
I very much enjoyed that joke.
Yeah. I also like the comeback that she's like, occasionally I'm callous and strange, and she owns it. She owns that.
Yep.
And yeah, and they kind of decide to just leave the demons there, which is, I mean, sure, why not? I mean, someone will clean it up eventually, I'm sure. Yeah. And they exit while Giles misunderstands every one of Xander's references. And that's the opening. So that's our setup for this kind of weird bottle episode. My note here is that, like, you have this line from Giles that says that both Willow and Xander shouldn't have been there, but like later on, Willow's definitely included in the group of capable people.
Yeah.
And Xander's not. And so it's interesting that, like, in this intro, they kind of lump Willow and Xander together, but later on it just becomes more and more just Xander alone is worthless. Xander alone is the weakest link, which isn't untrue, but it's interesting that at the beginning it was dangerous for both Xander and Willow to be involved, and then as it progressed into an apocalypse, suddenly Willow's cool to be a part of it, but Xander needs to stay clear.
And Oz is nowhere around.
Yeah, Oz isn't. I mean, would it be? I don't know.
Wait, he is. Yeah, he's only in wolf form, though.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, though, I don't know if this is the first night of the full moon or the night before the full moon, based on the way that... Because we definitely have at least 2, but I can't remember if we have 3 nights of full moon Oz.
Well, no, I was just... I was thinking, Oz is nowhere near Willow, and that's where he always is, so he wasn't in the episode. And then I remembered he's there, but as a wolf.
Yeah, and it may be the night before, because it's the night before and the night after the full moon, as well as the full moon itself that he turns. So it might be the night before the full moon tonight, and then the next night we see him go into the cage, and then the next night is the apocalypse. Is that right? I don't know. It's not important. Oh, man. So we're at the high school, and Xander apparently is really craving some male bonding. He really wants to, like,
this
throw
is
some
odd.
Football. It's apparently something that's very important to him. He's very passionate about suddenly.
Yeah, so he's yelling to 2 other guys he knows by name and telling him to toss me one. I'm open, and they keep ignoring him. And finally, one of them tosses him the ball. And then he bobbles it, and it ends up hitting the food of someone else who is a bully. And Xander says he's sorry, and the bully, whose name is Jack, just goes right into insulting him. Xander is really awkward. And then Xander asks if he could buy him another soda or replace his lunch, and Jack, as the bully, just says, I ought to cut your face open. And it is a very classic example of that escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then Xander finally is like, but it was an accident. Then Jack tells him that he's going to get his buddies together and kick his ass and I'm like, yeah, but he's got to go get his friends. So, I mean, he can't do anything to Xander without his friends, apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah.
He's a big badass bully, except he has to have some extra people around in order to beat anybody up. That's what I'm understanding from this.
And then Xander turns around and runs into Cordelia. And Cordelia is very insulting as well.
Mm-hmm.
And very condescending and all that. Mentions that Jack, who is the bully, has repeated the 12th grade 3 times. And I was like, really? How likely is that? I mean, wouldn't you just drop out or take the GED? Like, why is he still going to school? At 20 years old? 20 or 21? Why is he still, why? They wouldn't let him do that. Anyway, Cordelia walks off and gloating about how much she enjoyed that. And then we move to the cafeteria where we see Xander and Oz discussing cool. Xander is very much obsessing about coolness and how you get it. And Oz is very much being Oz.
Yes.
It's just that it's bugging me. This cool thing. But I mean, what is it? How do you get it? Who doesn't have it? And who decides who doesn't have it? What is the essence of cool?
Not sure.
I mean, you yourself, Oz, are considered more or less cool. Why is that?
Am I?
Is it about the talking? You know, the way you tend to express yourself in short, non-committal phrases?
You could be.
Great moment of just Xander being the ultimate tryhard and Oz just being the epitome of chill, and seeing that like yin and yang between the two of them. It's a really fun scene.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And then Xander decides he has to get something that's his thing. Mm-hmm. And we cut to the library where Giles is saying it's the end of the world.
So yeah, like it feels like we're going really fast. This episode is like so punchy with his cuts. Like it's so fast. And I really love that as a viewing experience in the scene by scene breakdown. It's going to be kind of crazy, especially towards the end. I know that much.
Yeah. But also starting right now until the end of the episode, throughout the entire episode, every single scene with that's not about Xander is incredibly dramatic and tense and overdone.
Yes.
Obviously on purpose, but like anything in this episode for the rest of the time is literally the end of the world.
Well, and it's funny because one, it's very satirical about like the Buffy formula in general, and the stuff that it just gradually gets more and more angsty and really relies on that formula. But it's also so pivotal to understand that in this episode you are very deeply in Xander's POV, which doesn't happen as much with television as it does with like reading a book. With reading a book, it's very common to really get inside someone's head and understand that when they're viewing the world around them, they have their own reasoning for seeing things the way they see them. And so with a television show where you have to present to the audience something that's a little bit more neutral, you don't get that as much. But with this episode, even the parts where Xander isn't in the scene, you can kind of feel like this is how Xander views the world around him, and it makes it a really fun viewing experience. But like, I feel like the scenes building up to this start to dig you into that point of view of it. You're very Xander focused for the scenes leading up to this moment, which is our first scene, even though he's not really in the opening much because he's under a pile of rubble. Our first scene without Xander in it, and you just kind of get gradually deeper and deeper into the Xander point of view, where he, when in that moment where he's having that back and forth with Jack, and he's so like tripping over himself and so almost over the top himself, because that's how he views himself when he's around someone like that. He views himself as being, weak and spazzy and not nearly as cool. And that back and forth between him and Cordelia, I feel like could read much in the same way. I also love in that back and forth when he's talking about, I can face vampires and all of these hideous creatures, but someone like Jack O'Toole still makes me scared. And Cordelia's is like, that's because, you know, they don't notice you, whereas Jack actually noticed you. So there's something about, like, putting yourself into that point of view and also noticing Xander and Xander's point of view of the world around him. His conversation with Oz, you know, Oz is extra Oz in that scene because that's in a lot of ways how Xander sees Oz. I mean, it's not so over the top yet. I mean, Cordelia's mean and Oz is cool, but it feels like in those scenes, you know, Cordelia's extra mean, Oz is extra cool because of that point of view. And then you start to get into this stuff where Xander's not even there, but it really feels like you're still seeing through that Xander lens just how dramatic some of this stuff is, and just how casual Xander can be about it as we get in further on, because this is his normal. And you know, it's kind of fun to see how for everybody else it's the end of the world and it's super overblown and dramatic and stuff like that, and for Xander, he's just still kind of dealing with normal high school crap, because while he's definitely in that circle, there is part of him that's still dealing with things like regular high school bullies and self-confidence issues and ex-girlfriends and, you know, stuff that is kind of more normal teenage boy stuff to deal with. So it's really like, I really, really enjoy talking about this episode as a whole. So we'll probably rapid fire a few more scenes, and then I'll probably find somewhere else to talk about something. But it is very rapid fire on the scenes. So yeah, we're at the library, and it is in fact the end of the world. And Buffy's like, "Can they do that?"
Yeah, and Giles is like, "Yeah, they're going to do it." We never really figure out like exactly who is doing it.
Yeah, it's like the sisterhood of, and I'm not even sure how it's pronounced in the show. I have it written down here in a transcript, but it's the sisterhood of G, I think, or something like that. And yeah.
Are those the people who are causing the apocalypse, or those just people at the beginning, or both?
Well, it says, Giles says they seem fairly committed. The Sisterhood of G is an apocalypse cult. They exist solely to bring about the world's destruction.
Well, then, yes, I think they're probably involved.
I think they might be.
Yes. I'll point out here, Oz and Buffy are again dressed for different seasons, just so you know.
Yeah, yes.
I noticed that.
You kind of have to. It's part of it. But yeah, so Oz comes in and immediately goes to the cage. Giles mentions that he's cutting it close, and Buffy and Giles continue to talk that based on everything they see, it seems that they're looking at opening up the Hellmouth, and there's kind of this moment where Buffy's like, the Hellmouth, the one that opens, and they're like 20 feet from where you're standing, and they kind of look over at the floor, and then Oz in full werewolf jumps up and howls, and it's beautiful, isn't it? It's so beautiful. It's
perfect.
It's another very classic, like, horror movie trope thing of the howling wolf when something ominous is said, and I love it.
And then we are the next day in front of the school, and they are discussing what would happen if the Hellmouth opens again. And Willow comments that every nightmare she has that doesn't revolve around academic failure or public nudity is about the thing that comes out of the Hellmouth.
In fact, once I dreamt that it attacked me while I was late for a test and naked.
Which always makes me laugh.
Yeah,
I think that was funny too.
That's a rough dream.
Yeah, that's a hard dream. And Buffy says, you know, that thing will come out first, and then there'll be a lot more, and we're going to get overrun with demons, and that they're headed into deep research mode. And then someone honks behind them, and they turn around, and it's Xander in a 57 Chevy Bel Air that is blue, powder blue. And he's asking if they need a lift, and is showing off his car, which he is renting from his uncle, who has a bunch of DUIs and can't drive it.
Yep.
And they're not very excited about the car, and Xander's like, "Why are you not excited?" And they explain that the world is ending, and Xander's like, "Well, we'll handle it together. Tell me what I can do." And then we cut to him at the donut shop buying donuts for everyone, which is a really funny cut.
Yes. This episode is full of those. Like Buffy in general is full of those, but this episode particularly really has those set up and payoff cuts. Yeah, we had one earlier where Oz is telling Xander that he's overthinking the whole thing and it's not, and then it cuts to Giles saying the end of the world, and like it's just that's something that is repeated throughout this as well. And I think in a way kind of works again to connect this as all one continuing story, even the stuff that is outside of Xander's POV, it kind of works to connect that as still continuing the Xander train that is this episode. But yeah, he orders the donuts and Cordelia's there mocking him, saying that, they entrusted him with this crazy mission. And wow, like Xander's comeback. I mean, I get the continual harshness of Cordelia grating on you, but him saying feel free to drop dead of a wasting disease in the next 20 seconds is really like that's a strong comeback from Xander.
Yeah.
But she just kind of takes it in stride and just like, oh yes, I'm getting under his skin, this is good, I like it.
They turn to the car and he goes to get in it and Cordelia says, oh, what? You got a shiny new car and now you're someone new, like anyone cares about. And at this point, a girl walks up and asks Xander, is that your car? Mm-hmm. But I want to point out there, though, that Cordelia cares. All through previous episodes, she was all about what cars guys drove, having nice cars, talking about different types of interiors and upholstery in cars. So yeah, she does.
Well, and this is like, again, and I think this works being more in the Xander POV, but I think this is one of the only episodes that I can think of, other than maybe that little bit of reconciliation during the prom, where you kind of see that the two of them aren't really completely over each other. Like there's still some lingering feelings and some extra meanness coming out because that's how they express their feelings, because they're both not very developed when it comes to expressing feelings in healthy ways at this point, at least. And so like we really see that in this, where she's extra bitter towards him and he gets really excited about the idea of making her jealous using this girl that's excited about the car. Like, I mean, there's something there still lingering in this episode that I don't feel like we see much of after the breakup. But yeah, this girl's super into it, like, says all kinds of really specific things about the make of the car and the engine and everything, and Xander's just like, yeah, that all seems like it's a possible thing that this vehicle has.
Yep.
And asks if she would like to go for a drive, and says he just needs to drop off these donuts, and he would then describe himself as expendable, making a direct callback to Cordelia calling him expendable from the group earlier. He would be with the group. There is no way, when it is the end of the world, that Xander would not be in the library helping them research. So you just have to kind of pretend that's not the case to keep going with the show. Yeah, there's nothing really set up to where I can explain that away. It's just because of the desire for it. I think while they set it up and keep explaining to Xander that this is big, this is terrible, this is like super awful end of the world stuff, I think there's also something about the way in which Xander views something like his friends having to deal with the end of the world as an everyday normal scenario. And I think there's something that could be played with that. I don't think it's executed the best, because I agree with you. I think Xander would actually be with his friends in this moment and trying to help and forcing himself in there just because of the nature of what we've seen Xander do in the past. But there is something that in a way adds to the commentary that they're trying to create of Xander being removed enough from the supernatural aspects that all of his friends have really, I mean, there's not a one of them that hasn't done stuff that delves directly into magic or supernatural. And so kind of having that be like, these are the people I hang out with, the end of the world's kind of a casual thing now, kind of works to that commentary. But you are right that it is you have to suspend your disbelief in order to roll with this.
He wouldn't be helping.
He wouldn't be helping himself, because we know Xander. So anyway, He hops into the car very gracefully, and they pull away. And they're at the Bronze later, and I'm gonna throw out that we have a song here. We've had kind of a drought when it comes to music. The last 2 episodes haven't had any music at all.
Yeah.
But this is called G Song by Supergrass, and it's very low in the background, as normal Bronze songs are, and they're sitting there at one of the tables, and the girl's just rattling off all of her exes and all of the vehicles that they drove, and Xander is clearly just miserable.
Yeah, he's not feeling it.
And you can definitely tell when Angel walks in, and he's super, super excited to see Angel, his friend buddy.
So Angel is asking where Buffy is, and he's like, something's happening. And Xander's like, yeah, apocalypse, they're on top of it. And Angel, very dramatically, I don't think they know what they're dealing with. Xander's like, well, let's go tell them. And Angel's like, no, you stay out of harm's way. Which I again feel like Xander would not take Angel saying that to him. Mm-hmm. Like, especially Angel. Mm-hmm. But Angel leaves, and Xander kind of looks after him as he leaves. And then Lisette, I think her name is, asks him if he wants to go for another drive. So they go outside, and he is conveniently parked directly in front of the Bronze. And Xander's kind of mumbling about how he's helped before, and they act like he's some klutz as he starts the car and drives directly into the car in front of him. And Lisette tells him that's going to trash his hood, and he gets out to inspect the damage to the car he hit, and the door opens, and Jack steps out. Yeah.
Yeah. There is this lovely line where he's just like saying, tell himself, stay calm, just a little fender bender, it's not. And then when Jack steps out, he says the end of the world. And I just love that juxtaposition. Like, I can completely agree that this episode makes no sense, but also this episode makes perfect sense,
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those things like, obviously Xander would be helping in the apocalypse. Obviously Xander wouldn't be putting up with that from Angel, but also obviously this is the story that they're trying to tell, and they tell it so flawlessly that I don't care.
Yeah.
So we come back from a commercial break to the library. Oz is very rowdy in his cage. Willow says he's cranky. She says that can't dogs sense when there's an earthquake or cows lie down or something like that. So she's trying to figure out if he's predicting the apocalypse coming by comparing him to random animals and trying to remember how they sense things.
Of course.
And Buffy's kind of reading off some more stuff about the sisterhood and how they're a race of female demons, fierce warriors, and that they celebrate the victory in battle by eating their foes. And it says they couldn't just pour Gatorade on each other, which I also enjoy. There's a lot of great, I feel like there's so many lines in this episode that you just don't appreciate because there's so much in this episode that's just silly and fun. But there's a lot of little lines in this episode that I appreciate as well. This is when Giles says the council won't take his calls, which again we've explained doesn't make any sense, but also, whatever. Again, it's poking fun of it at itself. So I guess there's nothing. I think I like this episode so much because anything that doesn't make sense, I'm just like, this is kind of the narrative that they go for, that there's so much in Buffy that doesn't make sense that you can kind of embrace anything that doesn't make sense and be like, yeah. And then Giles says that he's going to contact the spirit guides, which I think is also just another delightful trope that they bring up, like this random, guiding force for this one episode that Giles can go and consult with that's never brought up before this and never brought up again after this, to kind of just play with all of the one-time conveniences of the show as well.
Yeah.
And then they have a conversation about how there's no more jelly donuts, and that Giles always asks for there to be a jelly in the mix, and then suggests that Xander needs to go and make another run, and Buffy's like, no, Xander's out of this. He nearly got killed last time we fought. This whole thing would be easier if we know he's safe. And then we cut
Which again makes no sense. They would never say that about Xander. He would be with them even if he wasn't being useful.
Oh, but yeah. And again, this is just another one of those setups. Those setup cuts that we love so much of this episode, where as soon as she says that, it cuts over to Xander with Jack, and Jack is bad.
Yeah, he is mad. He gets out, and Xander's like, oh, well, I'm sorry. Your car came out of nowhere. And he says, I was parked. And Xander says, exactly. And it starts saying how he doesn't have insurance, but he'll cover the damages. And Jack pulls a huge Bowie knife out of his pants and asks Xander, where do you want it? And I'm like, what? Who talks like that? But Xander is like, yeah, no, I don't want it at all. And then they discuss how he named his knife Katie, which I kind of think is a good name for a knife.
Sure. Katie the knife. I get it.
And then Jack asks Xander if he's scared, and Xander's like, would that make you happy?
Mm-hmm.
And then Jack has this whole thing about, the difference is that I'm not scared and you are. And anyway, Jack, they end up kind of struggling with the knife, and luckily one of Sunnydale's single cop, I guess, shows up at this point, who has never in his life been to the Bronze before. Or his career, never in his career been to the Bronze before, and asks him what's happening. And Xander backs Jack up, say, no, we were just messing around. And then Jack's like, that was all right. You didn't narc on me, so now you're my friend. And gets in the car with Xander, and Xander's like, what about your car? And he goes, it's not mine. And they drive off to apparently get Jack's buddies.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're in a graveyard, and Jack is doing a ceremony at the foot of a grave. My only note about this little spell thing he does, actually I have two of them, but it's like, how is this so easy to do this? And also, why does everyone in scenes like this, in like every show and movie, cut the palm of their hand? Why?
Truth.
Cut the side of your wrist or a finger or something. The palm of your hand is going to be so painful, and it's going to get so dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Cut something else. Why? It always, and every time something happens, every time there's a scene like this, it always brings me out of it because they cut the palm of their hand. And I'm like, no one would do that.
I had never thought of that, but you're so right.
It's like
that's
the
not a good
absolute
place to
worst
cut.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My note on this
and
is...
so now every time you see it, you'll get brought out too.
Yeah. My note on this is like, we discover later on that he's dead. So how is he like bleeding in the first place to do this?
I didn't even think of it. I did not even think of that.
You would think that this would require some kind of living blood sacrifice or something going on here.
Well, maybe because it was only 10 minutes, so he still had blood.
Yeah.
I
don't know how it would work exactly, but it's kind of funny. I mean, vampires bleed, and that doesn't really make sense either. So it's, again, another scenario. Again, anything you can point out about this episode that doesn't make sense, you can also say, but it was in this episode and also in the show. So, I mean.
Yeah. So then a hand comes out of the grave, and then a body, and then Bob pops out. And Bob is wearing a Letterman's jacket, which seems like he would not be the person who would be friends with Jack, being a jock. Yeah. But apparently they're the best of friends, and they give each other a giant hug and stuff. And at this point, Lisette screams and runs away. And my only note about that is what took her so long.
Yeah.
Like... If somebody takes me to a graveyard and starts cutting their palm and saying rhyming words and stuff, I'm gone. I'm not waiting to see what happens. I'm just leaving. And then Jack mentions that his grandpappy told him how to do it. And they headbutt, and Xander tries to leave, but they're like, no, you got our wheels. And they go to get the next friend, and Xander's like, are all your friends dead? They ignore him, and apparently Bob had been dead for 8 months.
8 months.
And Jack mentions that he had to wait for the stars to align. So I'm guessing that the stars were automatically aligned when Jack died for his grandpappy to bring him back.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't think too hard on it. It's fine.
Yeah, they're gonna get all the old gang together and party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is such a silly, wacky episode. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have Giles also in the cemetery and talking to the spirit guides.
This scene seems like it has no point. Oh,
it's so great though, because I think it's just so. there's so many times where I can feel like this is something that would be in an actual episode of Buffy and still serve no point, but still be there. You know, we talk about the three and all of that, like going back to that, like just kind of like the wacky side plots that's just like, look at these supernatural things, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
But I think the nature of let's go seek guidance from this big spiritual thing to help us fight these bad foes and not actually get any help from these big spiritual things is very typical Buffy. But yeah, it basically he summons them and they brush him off is basically what the scene is.
Yeah. They're like, yeah, we're not telling you anything.
And so Xander, who's there with his recently resurrected buds, kind of walks away from them and finds Giles conveniently and says, hey, what's going on? And he says that he was just trying to gain access to the spirit guides and it was not going well, and asks what he's doing there, and he's just like, well, I'm just raising some heck.
No, yeah.
Yay! So he asks if they need any help, and he says no. It's probably best if you stay out of trouble. And at
this point, it's very surprising that Giles does not wonder why Xander's in a graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not. What are you doing here?
There's something to be said about the preoccupied nature of Giles, especially when it comes to being aware of, like, we've had this talk before, I think, about how little awareness Giles has when it comes to what Xander's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's just got, like, a blind spot where he just completely ignores Xander's presence, even when he's talking directly to him. But, yeah, he gives this great line where he's just like, there's something different about this menace, something in the air, the stench of death. And Xander's like, yeah, I think it's Bob. And Giles says that he needs to go. He has to have time to prepare. We'll need all the time we can get, basically. And it cuts to Buffy at Willie's bar saying, it's gonna happen tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry, in my opinion, this is the most dramatic scene in the episode.
It's really good.
With Willie, where I just don't even know what to say about this scene.
It's so
intense.
So intense, and it's so somehow completely out of left field, but like I totally get it. Like Willie, in the little bit of screen time he's had, has always been a little overly familiar with Buffy, but not in a gross way, but almost like in like a fan way. Like Willie's almost like a fan in this moment. It's just like you and Angel really just need to like go and find a private space together. Like it's like Willie really ships Buffy and Angel in this moment.
Oh yeah.
But it's just like completely inappropriate and out of left field for Willie to be talking this way. And like they're very intimate and like almost friends in a way. Like she's just like, don't worry, the ambulance is on its way. And he's just like, look kid, I need you to understand, kid. And it's just so funny.
Yeah, I don't okay, so
yeah, I mean it's completely over the top, but I love every second of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. But basically they're talking like it's the end of the world, which it is.
It is. It's the end of the world, and it's so
and now
like
like
we're made very aware just how close, like how real this end of the world is, even though we don't actually
know anything about
it, and it's a 1 episode end of the world arc. I mean, but I think it's fun because it plays with the idea of there's a lot about the way TV is formatted and the audience knowledge of understanding that it's not going to be the end of the world because it's a TV show kind of deal. And so the fact is, no matter how dramatic, no matter how invested your audience can become, ultimately every end of the world story arc for Buffy plays out like this when you really boil it down, of just like a bunch of people overacting and reacting to this concept of it being the end of the world, while the audience fully is aware that it's not going to be the end of the world and it's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then we're back in the car, in Xander's car, and there are 2 more guys with them, a Dickie and a Parker.
A Dickie and a Parker.
And they are each one more decomposed and gross
Do
than
you
the
think
other.
this is a foreshadowing that Parker is a dick?
Oh, yeah. Play on words there. And Bob is yelling to get some beers, although they're dead. I have no idea how they're going to drink them. Parker wants to pick up some girls and hang out at Taco Bell and get some girls to cruise around. And I'm not sure how these decomposing corpses think that they're going to hook up with some girls, but apparently they think it's a possibility.
Well, you know, it's Sunnydale. It takes all kinds. There's not that many options.
And then Dickie says he wants to bake a cake, and they talk for a minute about how Bob got shot, and was it the Jackals, which I'm assuming is a gang.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack replies, "Are you kidding? We wiped them out after they threw you off the bridge." Here's my thing. When did Sunnydale get gangs? When did this town become big enough that there are actual, not even gang, but gangs plural, like rival ones?
In the episode called the Zeppo.
Yeah, this one?
Yeah.
And, but like, okay, Sunnydale has gangs and gang violence now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And several times during this conversation in here, Parker, who is sitting right behind Xander, puts his hand on Xander. And I noticed that this happens like several times. And like one is too much, but like he keeps touching Xander and it's really creepy. So Xander again tries to get away from him because he's like, "You guys want me to drop you somewhere?" And they're like, no, you're with us. And they decide they're going to bake a cake, which obviously means something else. They pull up to the store, and Jack is like, "You stay here, keep the motor running." And Xander is sitting there while they break in. And then Xander sees on the other side of the road Willow coming out of the magic shop. Saying thank you and sorry to wake you, and has a very similar conversation with Willow that he had with Giles, where Willow is talking about the stuff, it's happening and we need this stuff and everything, and Xander's trying to get her to say something and she doesn't, and then she's finally like, "I love you, Xander," and hugs him and leaves, which again, these two would not be separate during the end of the world. I just do not think they would. But yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
And Xander kind of decides, he's like, "Okay, that's it. I'm going to," talking about he's going to go, join the gang, and turns around and there's Jack. And he tries to get away again, saying, something's coming or something's come up. I got to go. And they basically are like, "No, we need you." And then they decide, Jack says Xander needs to feel like he's part of the group. He needs to be initiated. And Xander's like, yeah, sure. I'll be in the gang. And Jack tells him he's got to die.
That is a rough initiation process.
Yeah, pretty much. And Xander's like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that." And Bob says, "Are you too good to be dead? You got something against dead people?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, we kind of do." I mean, I'm sure he does, right? Like, who wouldn't? And then Xander points out that Jack isn't dead. And Jack pulls up his shirt to see a bunch of bullet holes in his chest and said, 3 weeks ago, drive by. And I have lots of things to say about this. First, where did all this crime in Sunnydale? Because they have drive-bys now? Like, anyway, apparently Grandpappy found his body and he wasn't gone 10 minutes before he was raised from the dead. So I guess, Grandpappy just happened to have all the stuff and the stars were aligned when he died.
Yeah.
But why is he hanging out at the high school? Like, why? Why did he go back to school? Not only is he like 21
guy and a third-year senior.
Right. He's also dead. Like that, I wouldn't go to high school if that was the case, But anyway.
I love all of these. I love all of these questions because I'm about to blow this whole thing wide open in a few minutes. So just keep throwing those questions because they're so good.
Well, they decide they're going to kill Xander, and he says, "All right, enough," and then basically runs away. He runs through like the coffee shop, which is open, I guess. Then inside, and he comes back and jumps over stuff and makes it to his car and takes off. And they had still all their stuff to bake a cake was in there.
Oh no!
Yeah. Oh no. And they decide it's not a big deal. They're going to get more. And Xander drives away. Yeah.
We cut to Faith fighting one of the demons, and Xander conveniently pulls up and was able to hit the demon, who was outmatching Faith at that point, with the vehicle, and then pull around so she can jump in, and they drive off and make it to Faith's motel, where they rush inside. Xander's worried that the demon followed, and she said, no, we're cool, but her shoulder's been dislocated, and asks Xander to hold her, which he kind of very, very awkwardly starts to, like, come to her in an embrace, and she just grabs him to where she's holding her arm and kind of jerks in a way to pop her shoulder back into place.
Mm-hmm.
And then she kind of gets a little in the mood after that, and says, stuff about how having a fight like that with no kill, she feels like she's ready to pop, and starts to get a little closer with Xander, and end up throwing him on the bed and straddling him. And then we have this shot. That this is the shot I've been waiting for. For me, this is the most important shot in the entire episode. But it's a cut to a shot of their reflection in the TV while they're having sex.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this shot so much. Because for me, this is the shot that screams, hey, this is a TV show, right? This is the point in the episode where it's just like, this is a TV show. Just a reminder, this is a TV show. So all of those questions that you've been asking cracked me up so much because they're all such tropey TV show things. Like small towns having gang violence and drive-bys. And you'll notice anytime that I've mentioned, oh, they just conveniently are in the same place. I think every time there's been an encounter with Xander and one of the Scoobies today, I've made sure to say, and they're conveniently there, because that's a thing in TV shows, like when Cordelia was conveniently at the coffee shop, when Giles was conveniently at the cemetery, when Willow was conveniently across the street.
Okay, so while Cordelia being at the coffee shop is much more plausible than running into Giles at the graveyard and Willow like on the street while
but you'll notice
in the situation he's in.
You'll notice that it escalated, right? It just happened that they were at the coffee shop at the same time when he was getting donuts, and then it escalated to more and more ridiculous. They just keep running into each other and keep brushing Xander off because of the nature of this being a full realization of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the television show, right?
Yeah.
Not Buffy, not the Buffyverse, but the way in which we consume television, and the fact that we the audience have to process the fact that what we're watching is ridiculous. It's full of conveniences, it's full of over dramatized relationships, it's full of end of the world scenarios that come out of nowhere and are swept up like they were nothing afterwards. It's just full of all of this, and I just love that there's this shot of of them in the TV, kind of really like hammering it in at this point. It's just like, yep, this is kind of what we've been going for this whole time, of just being like, this is so deep in the meta that we're literally gonna show you this sex scene reflected in a television to show you again that this is a TV show. And I loved that shot so much. But like, even the Jack being in high school, that's such a like silly thing that happens all the time. Like I think we've had that comment about several characters in several different fandoms. I think everybody's had that conversation. I mean, even after that, we had that conversation when Twilight came out, right? It was like, why are these guys still in high school, right?
Yeah.
They're centuries-old vampires. Why are they still... But that's such a tropey thing. That's such a tropey thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make up reasons for it, but it's also just following the tropes of it. So, like, you don't have to come up with a reason for why Jack is in high school still, because he's following a trope. That's a television trope of someone who is just in high school because this is a high school show.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still going to ask questions.
Well, that's fine. But that's what we do as a fandom. But I think that this episode is so clever in the way that it basically can just trump all questions. Like, you can be like, why are there Why are there gangs suddenly in Sunnydale? I was just like, because that's the point of this episode, to just point out all the ridiculous things that happen in television that make no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And in an episode where, and granted, we pointed out and been like, why is this a thing? Why is this a thing? Why can he summon this guy and do this spell? And why is this all so easy? But also, this is an episode which features resurrecting the dead, the end of the world, a giant bomb at the bottom of the high school. I mean, crazy over the top things. And still, as people who are critical, and that's what we're doing in this podcast, is being critical of the show and nitpicking little things. As people are critical, we'll point out things like, man, it really doesn't make sense for Sunnydale to have gangs.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's funny. I think it's just like a really, really clever meta commentary on the way that we view television and the way we watch television, the way we criticize television, and the things we choose to pick apart and the things we accept at face value. But yeah, Xander and Faith get a little bounce wow wow and cuddle for a few minutes, and then she says, "That was great. I got a shower," and kicks him out, which is
like doesn't even let him get dressed,
which is great.
He's just gone.
He's just standing there, clutching his clothes, and just so confused.
Mm-hmm. So then he leaves, and he goes and looks in his car and discovers that it's not for a cake. It's bomb supplies. So then Xander decides he's got to find them.
Yep.
He's got to be a hero, and that he needs Buffy. So he goes to the mansion, where this one ranks second for the most dramatic scene of the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Realistically, it should have been the most dramatic, but man, that Willie's performance earlier was so good.
Oh yeah.
And this, I think that was more of a leap. This doesn't seem, even though it's obviously exaggerated, it doesn't seem as much of a leap as it probably feels like it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Like, I could totally buy Buffy and Angel having this conversation.
Yeah. The Willie one was less plausible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they are in the midst of talking about the apocalypse, and that apparently, again, everything's very obscure about what's actually going on, but something's going on where Angel may have to risk his life, and Buffy's like, I can't watch you die again. And then they exchange I love yous, and he says that nothing can change that, not even death. And she jerks away and just like, don't talk like that.
Except that they are literally always talking like that, but okay.
And then, like, in the midst of this heated clash and all of this angst, Xander just kind of clears his throat.
It's like, maybe. Yeah, never mind. And he walks out and then comes back in and says, can I help? Like, what are you going to do, Xander? And then he leaves and just is going to try and figure out what they're going to bomb.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we're back at the library with Willow and Giles, and we see that Willow's coming back from having moved Oz.
Yeah, we did.
Which I'm surprised that she did that on her own.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
yeah,
funny.
I'm surprised Giles let her do it on her own.
I didn't even think about that. I was about to say, I do. There was a brief scene. I just realized when we got to that, I was just like, oh, we skipped that. But there was a brief scene earlier where she had to shoot Oz. But basically, Giles lets him out, and she shoots him a couple of times, and then pets him and says sorry. It's pretty cute.
Yeah, it wasn't in the script. I think is why we skipped it. But
Interesting.
It actually works even without it.
Yeah. Giles asks Willow to help him set up for a spell, and Willow knows the spell, but Giles immediately shuts her down as far as her doing it herself and says that he wants her safe. So I guess that's still kind of supportive of the idea of at the beginning where he said that both Willow and Xander shouldn't have been there. At least he's still kind of being that protective boy for Willow. And they start setting up for whatever magical thing that they're going to do to save the world later on. And we cut to the boiler room where we have our undead gang putting the bomb together, and Parker's excited, and Jack's like, this is gonna be large. And they're all just like cheering and all excited about blowing up the school.
They very much give Guy is still obsessed with high school, trying to hang out with high school kids in their early 20s vibes.
Yeah.
All of them. Of course, we don't know how old the rest of them were, or we don't know if they were 20 and 21 either. But they're all obsessed with high school because they go to blow it up. Xander decides that Giles will know what to do. And he sees something, and it's all of the guys walking down the road. And so Xander makes a plan and drives by them and grabs Parker and drags him along the car, asking him where the bomb is. And Parker doesn't even hesitate. He's just at the high school. Xander tries to get all tough and tell him he's got to ask something and he needs to get it right. And then a mailbox cuts Parker's head off.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if is he still going to be animated after that, or...
That is a good question. I don't know how the spell works on that. It's implied that he's dead at that point, like dead.
Yeah.
Permanent dead.
Yeah.
Because it implies that they're all pretty much permanently dead at the end of this. Except for, I guess, one just runs away. Do we ever see him again? One just runs away at one point. Anyway, it's not important. None of this matters. It's a TV show. But I love the fact that Parker's so decrepit that, like, I mean, they're going at a decent clip, but they're not going too fast, and hitting the mailbox decapitates him. It's quite fun.
Yeah.
So, once Xander realizes that he's just holding a body without a head, he drops it in panic and says, I probably should have left out that whole middle part.
Yeah. So, and then he turns to go to the school, and Jack and everyone see him and figure it out and start running after him.
Yes. So, like, I feel like I just gotta, like, rapid fire go through this until we get to the final moments between Xander and Jack in the basement. Are you good with that?
I'm good with that. Go for it.
So, yeah. So, they're chasing him into the school. He's just like, where's the Slayer? When we cut to the library where they're dealing with the Hellmouth opening up, and Giles is like, oh my god, it's grown. And you can see through the window that they're all running by, and then Dickie stops and looks through the window. He's like, wow. And you kind of have more chasing amongst the halls. They've kind of lost Xander, so they decide to split up. At this point, Bob finds a fire axe and says it's good for chopping. Which is also fun. There's an encounter between Bob and Xander where Xander's able to get the upper hand, and then he uses the axe to tilt the vending machine on top of Bob, crushing him. And then Dickie shows up, and Xander's like, you should have learned by now, if you're gonna play with fire, you gotta expect sooner or later. And Dickie runs away, and he's like, no, I wasn't finished.
Nobody lets me finish.
There's some more cuts to the library where Buffy's getting flunked through the doors down the hall and jumps up and says, Faith, you gotta go for the heart, and runs back in. Dickie runs around the corner and disappears, and then Xander goes down that same corner, and then you see them both run back from the opposite direction with a demon chasing them. So the demons get Dickie. They tear Dickie apart. That was what I was missing earlier. I was thinking, did Dickie get away? But no, he gets torn apart by the demons here, where Xander's able to duck around a corner, and the demons follow Dickie through into a classroom and tear him apart. And then Xander says, okay, let's go to the boiler room. And that's when he starts to run towards the boiling room, assuming the shortest path, except that one of the demons from the Hellmouth punches through the wall, and he's like, okay, other way. So he runs the other way. And then we cut to the basement where he kicks open the door and enters to see the bomb. He says, hello, nasty. It's got less than 2 minutes left. And Jack is there basically to try to prevent him from disarming it. And Xander's like, I'm not leaving till that thing's disarmed. And Jack says, well, then I guess you're not leaving. And they start to fight. Jack says he's going to carve him up and serve him with gravy. Man, that's an image right there. And Xander says you're going to do all of that in 49 seconds. And this is when Jack kind of starts to panic a little bit. Get a little fear going. And this is when Xander kind of takes over. He kind of takes control. And I'm gonna play a sound clip here because I like this little back and forth.
I know what you're thinking. Can I get by him? Get upstairs, out of the building, seconds ticking away. I don't love your chances.
Then you'll die too.
Yeah, looks like. So I guess the question really is, who has less fear?
I'm not afraid to die. I'm already dead.
Yeah, but this is different. Being blowed up isn't walking around and drinking with your buddies dead. It's little bits being swept up by a janitor dead, and I don't think you're ready for that.
Are you?
I like the quiet.
So, okay, after that, we are back in the library, and there is more fighting, and Giles doing Latin words, and all that. And then we're back to the boiler room where they're kind of still in the standoff, and Jack drops Katie and grabs the bomb and pulls out the green wire and deactivates it, and Xander says, "Good boy."
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, at this point, I'm kind of like, "Oh, Xander, don't go too far." And then Xander says, "I don't think I want to be seeing you around campus anymore, Jack." And then Xander leaves, and I don't really get why he leaves because the bomb and Jack are behind him. Jack can just reset it.
Mm-hmm. It's because it's a TV show, Kim.
Right, but well, that's what we do.
It's so, yeah, I know. It's so, like, this episode trumps what we do. That's the great thing about this episode. Like, again, completely illogical for him to do it this way, but it makes sense in the context of the fact that nothing in this episode makes sense. But yeah.
Well, then we're back in the boiler room, and Jack goes to the other side because there's two exits in the high school boiler room.
Yes.
And he opens the door, and Jack says, "I'm not going anywhere the first time you turn your back." And then he is cut off, and we discover where Werewolf Oz was stored.
It's great.
And he, I assume, eats Jack.
It's confirmed because Oz says he's oddly full the next day. You know, slim pickings sometimes for a Werewolf Oz. He just gotta snack on what's around. And that's like that crazy cluster of happenings going on in the high school drawn to an end. And then it's the next day, and it's bright and sunshiny, and everything's calm, and the gang's sitting there talking about the apocalypse. Everything that happened. Oz asks if Angel's gonna be okay, and Buffy's just like, he was only out for a few minutes, but they were longest of her life. And talking about its real face, whatever it is, and all of this stuff that we never got to see because we weren't there for it, and it's just the most irritating yet wonderful thing to witness when they're talking about this apocalypse, and you're just like, "Gah, I get it," but also, "Grr." It's so effective. And Xander comes up, and they kind of say that it was super lucky you weren't at school last night. It was crazy, and Xander's just like, "Well, give me the quiet life," kind of echoing that speech from before of liking the quiet, and saying he's going to go get a snack and asks if anybody wants, because he's, of course, the designated snack man, claiming his role of sorts. And they all say no. Oz says he's oddly full today. And a final little exchange with Cordelia.
I will say, at the end of this exchange with Cordelia, when he walks away, is one of my favorite Xander scenes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting because I was talking earlier about the Xander and Cordelia being like almost extra mean to each other at points in this episode in order to deal with the fact that of their feelings and again to get you into that headspace of this is how Xander feels when he's around Cordelia. But here she is again talking him down, talking about how he's just the donut guy, and he just smiles and walks away. Doesn't feel the need to have a comeback in that moment, and that actually quite unnerves Cordelia, and she keeps saying what as he's walking away. But I think this is like one of the first and maybe only instances where I could say I think in this moment we have a more mature Xander. Than we have Cordelia.
Yeah.
But it's showing, I think, in a really simple and effective way that through this episode, Xander has matured a little bit and not felt the need to get into barbs with Cordelia at the end of this episode. And kind of understands that he has his own role and his own values and can kind of contribute and doesn't necessarily have to have the recognition for it either. Which is very different than how we've seen Xander up until this point.
Yeah, I love that scene when he's walking away. Just so confident. Mm-hmm. You know, very rarely like that.
Very rarely is Xander like that. But when you stare down Jack O'Toole in the basement of the school over a ticking bomb, man, what a confidence builder that is. Oh man, this is a really good Xander episode. And I have mentioned very frequently a lot of distaste towards Xander. He's not my favorite character. I feel like he lacks in a lot of ways the appropriate growth and character arc that I would have wished for him. I don't mind starting off Xander as kind of the embodiment of male toxicity and all of the stuff that he kind of has where he feels very entitled to things. But I feel like we never pulled away from that as much as we should have in his character arc, in his journey. But this isolated episode where he's still very young, he's still very self-focused, to have this kind of moment at the end where he gets a little bit more self-assured and a little more confident by the end of it, is a growing point for him. And the fact that he doesn't feel the need to talk to the gang about the fact that there was a bomb and that presumably they will never know that he did this day is kind of a cool little a moment for him that it doesn't make up for some of the terrible stuff he does. It definitely doesn't make up for, I think, a lot of people's biggest Xander complaints is when basically it never gets closure on when he lies to Buffy at the end of season 2, which I think for a lot of people that's like one of the biggest sticking points for Xander is they're like, God, why did they never bring that up again? Why did they never like make him pay for that? But it is one of those moments where he chose to keep stuff to himself in a positive way, which is shows a little bit of growth for Xander. You gotta give him props when he has those little bit of growth moments. He's gonna have moments later in the season where it seems like he hasn't grown at all again, but for this episode, for this moment,
he grew a little bit.
He grew a little bit.
Well, is that it? I'm good.
I think I'm good. I talked a lot about the meta stuff in this episode, and I feel like the meta stuff is the main point of this episode. It is a Xander-centric episode, and we see a little growth from Xander, but unfortunately, due to the nature of Xander's story arc, a lot of that reverts back to typical Xander behavior in future episodes, with the occasional glimmering hope that maybe they'll move him in the right direction, and then another thing that sets him back. It's a lot of push and pull with Xander, but like, for me, this episode is always gonna be the episode that really spells out to the fans is just like, this show is silly, and you should embrace just how silly this show is.
Yeah, definitely.
We will poke so much fun at ourselves because we created this wacky show. And I think we kind of mentioned this before, but I think we're about to get into our main like season 3 arc finally.
Yes.
Coming up. We got it.
Next is Bad Girls.
We got it. I'm excited. Give me my faith. Give me my mare. I want it. That's coming up next. And this has been the Zeppo. And we thank you all so much for listening. And this is when we say bye.
Bye.
Well, that was fun.
That was fun.
I very minimally...
I think this might be one of our shortest.
Yeah. I very minimally prepared for that episode because I knew I didn't really care to get into the nitpicky stuff on it, because I knew the nature of the episode basically was, you can't nitpick this episode.
Yeah, this is most definitely one of the shortest.
Yeah.